Why are we still having lockdowns?
The government approach doesn't make sense. Coronavirus mostly affects fat and old people, so in the first lockdown they stopped us going to the gym and locked us inside right next to the fridge, slowly getting fatter and older. I'm actually 7 months older than at the start of lockdown. Lockdown isn't protecting us from coronavirus, it's turning us into the perfect victims. Now they're stopping healthy people from going out and building up herd immunity. I totally get that we need to isolate vulnerable people. Fine. Don't let them come down the pub. I don't want to look at fat and old people while I'm trying to have a drink anyway. The average age of coronavirus deaths in Scotland is actually above the average life expectancy, which admittedly is about 38 because the amount of heroin we take. The coronavirus isn't an illness in Scotland, it's an elixir of life. If you catch it, you're going to live longer. The so-called second wave is just because we're testing more people, and it's overwhelmingly young people that are catching it who don't even get affected. Basically, coronavirus only kills very unlucky people, and do we really want very unlucky people around? What if a very unlucky person gets a job flying a plane or delivering a grand piano through a 4th floor window? Could be a total disaster. People are dying from missed medical treatments and screenings, and we've got skyrocketing levels of depression, domestic violence, substance misuse, suicide. I think the only thing stopping everyone from committing suicide is that you're only allowed 5 people at your funeral. Nobody wants to go out to that. We're furloughed so we can't work, but we don't even get a break because schools are shut, so we've got to bully our kids at home. In August, the government was literally bribing us £10 to get us to eat out to help out. Oh, that £10 I saved will come in really handy paying my £10,000 fine if I try the same thing this month. Eating out is crazy now. You get to the restaurant, you put on the mask, you walk across your table, you take off the mask. What was the point in that? The air's only bad for the 10 feet from the door to the table. There's a one-way system in shops and restaurants. I feel like I'm permanently trapped in an IKEA. There's only one person allowed in some shops. This winter, the leading cause of death will be standing in the rain outside a Boots. We had lockdown to prevent hospitals being overwhelmed. Hospitals aren't even a bit whelmed. And the government advice is so basic. Like, wash your hands. I was already washing my hands. I'm not from Dundee. What else do I not have to do? Not make a sandwich out of dog shit? The government says I should have sex through a glory hole? It's taking all the fun out of it when a government minister tells me to do it. Now I'm thinking about Matt Hancock on the other side. The Tories are supposed to be the party of strong economic stewardship and low public spending. The economy's been wrecked and the government is spending money like a drunk Saudi prince. I voted Boris and got Corbyn anyway. Lefties say, oh, Boris is putting money before lives. I wish he would put my money before lives. Small business revenue is down 30%, 22% of small businesses are closed forever, and live comedy is totally ruined. 78% of comedy venues think they're going to close. I can't get on the BBC because I'm working class and right wing who provide the wrong kind of diversity, so I'm reduced to doing outdoor gigs to people in cars or videos like this hoping somebody's going to chuck me a £5 on PayPal. It's not a way to make a living. I genuinely think the government is complicit in this because big corporations are easier to control, tax and regulate, and big corporations donate to the Tory party and give board and consulting and speaking roles to politicians. By killing off small businesses, the government is letting big corporations hoover up more of the market share. And the level of grifting is astonishing. Clearly inspired by Putin, the government have jumped at the chance to implement a kleptocracy and give their mates billions of pounds for PPE contracts that aren't being fulfilled because the companies they've commissioned don't even produce PPE. Some of them don't manufacture anything. £250 million of taxpayers' money went to Ayanda Capital, an investment company domiciled in Mauritius owned by mates of the government. Man, I'd have more respect for the government if they just loaded up a transit van with gold bars from the Bank of England. And the government is passing laws by decree with no parliamentary scrutiny or approval. Since the start of the pandemic, the government has made law using statutory instruments 242 times. And these laws are nuts. There's a ban on mass singing in pubs. There's £10,000 fines for organising protests. You know, that basic human right enshrined in the Human Rights Act. Students are being threatened with legal action for putting posters in their window and are literally imprisoned in their halls with the fire exits chained shut so they can safely burn to death free from coronavirus. And it's all supposed to be enforced by a police force that have as much of a clue as we do and are having to deal with rising levels of real crime. And we're being compelled to install an app that tracks our every movement and who we meet. We're tearing up our rights and handing huge power to the state. So far, 80% of the public support these measures, but that's just because they've been scared shitless by government hysteria. I voted Tory because all I've heard for the past 40 years is that they're supposed to be the nasty party, punishing the poor and the vulnerable, and they're going to dismantle the NHS. Now coronavirus comes along that specifically targets the poor and the vulnerable, and the Tories are actually trying to stop it, and they're protecting the NHS. What's that all about? Next election, I'm voting for a left-wing party. They're the new nasty parties. I mean, look at the darling of the left, the New Zealand Premier Jacinda Ardern. She's closing borders to immigrants. She's ending hard-won human rights like freedom of association or freedom of movement. She's doing brutal fascistic arrests on people for crimes like having a birthday party. She's introducing digital surveillance like you might see in an autocratic society. They're even keeping people out of mosques. The left have turned into a right bunch of Nazis. People are criticising Trump, calling Trump racist for saying it's from China, or telling people it can be cured by injecting bleach. Look, coronavirus is from China. That's literally where it's from. Some Chinese guy fucked a bat and ruined 2020 for everyone. They're all having pool parties now, while we can't even get full menu at Greg's. Oh, it's dangerous when Trump says you should inject yourself with bleach. Look, if you walk through any town centre in the UK, you can clearly see that we need to freshen up the gene pool a little. And anyone who injects themselves with bleach because Trump says that they should clearly isn't bringing much to the table. This is Darwinism in action. Trump should pick a different cleaning product every week to recommend people to inject to thin the herd a little. Trump isn't stupid. People are stupid. People are already eating Tide Pods. So why is the government reacting like this? I mean, coronavirus takes the same trajectory in all countries regardless of lockdown. Countries without a lockdown like Japan, South Korea, Sweden and Belarus haven't done any worse than countries that did. Basically, the government's overreacting because disasters are like steroids for politicians. They get to consolidate and increase power, get to pass new laws, they get to grift money to their party donor mates. It's a great time to be in power. You and your mates can fill your pockets from the state coffers, which is all going to get paid by future generations' tax if they ever let them out of their university accommodation to get an actual job. And instead of everyone being grumpy because of some boring thing like bin collections moving to fortnightly, people cower in front of the government in fear. A nation of scared crybabies wringing our hands together, praying the government will save us from the apocalypse. And governments never get in trouble for playing safe. They didn't even get in trouble for going into Iraq and killing 1.5 million people. You think they're going to get in trouble for this? And the government's overreacting because they're listening to scientists. Scientists always overplay the risks. If they say it's more dangerous, they get to go on TV and pretend they're in a disaster movie. Scientists spend all their time ignored by society, quite rightly, because they're total nerds, driving their shitty cars to boring laboratories where they push test tubes around and fill in numbers on a computer. Name one cool scientist apart from Dr. Malcolm in Jurassic Park. If you ever hear about a scientist modelling, they mean some boring nerd computer modelling, not real modelling, because scientists are all ugly and have bad skin. Pandemics, let them become rock stars for a bit. Look at the woman, Ferguson, the government's scientific advisor, broke lockdown to have an affair with. Antonia Stats. The only time scientists ever get to bone a girl as hot as her is when they make her in a computer in a 1980s film, or they get on telly because of some pandemic scare they made up. In previous pandemics, I'm using inverted commas because they were called pandemics by scientists but didn't turn out to be pandemical at all. In previous pandemics, the government's chief science guy, Neil Ferguson, got it totally wrong on foot and mouth. In 2001, Ferguson's modelling defied the advice of experts and led to 11 million livestock being culled, which means just the same as killed, but for cows it's said in a Glaswegian accent for some reason. There's been a murder. We've culled 11 million cows because we didn't listen to the experts. He got it wrong in mad cow disease as well. In 2002, Ferguson said that up to 150,000 people would die from human variant CJD, which is the fancy science name for mad cow disease. In the end, 177 people died. He got it wrong on bird flu. In 2005, Ferguson said that up to 200 million people would die from bird flu. You know how many people died? 282. Swine flu. In 2009, he said the UK would see 65,000 deaths from swine flu. 457 died. Now he said coronavirus could kill 500,000 people. The government's coronavirus predictions are based on a university-created model that's been tinkered with by repeated new entries, so nobody can explain how it works. My time working for the police and then the country's leading intelligence consultancy, Detica, taught me never, ever, ever, ever use any code or model that's been developed by a university. Because it's always written in 1982 in COBOL on a BBC Micro, can't be debugged, can't be explained, there's no iterations or history, and is repeatedly fudged to fit the data. Look at the extrapolation in deaths they've got for coronavirus. This graph shows the modelling for Sweden. The big bump is the exponential rise in deaths predicted by Ferguson's model if nothing was done, and the smaller bump is the rise if there was a moderate intervention, and the teeny tiny bits what actually happened in Sweden Sweden where they had minimal lockdown. I'm literally just putting the phrase modelling for Sweden in so confused men looking for Nordic babes click on this video. And never mind the batshit insane extrapolation and modelling, we can't even trust the real recorded cases. Most people with coronavirus don't even know they've got it. This is a good thing because it means the virus usually does nothing. But cases are increasing because testing capacity is shooting up, so cases are going up, so people get scared, so they want to be tested, so they test more and discover more cases, so people see the cases shooting up and get scared and want to get tested, so they're detecting more cases. And of course it's not just scientists and politicians who are blowing it out of proportion. Traditional TV and social media want you believing it's bad, so you watch the media to find out how bad it is. TV viewing figures have surged during the pandemic, and the value of tech companies has shot up too. They both want you stuck inside jabbing at your phone or trapped in front of the TV instead of talking to your friends face to face down the pub. And above all that, lots of people love lockdown because they like sitting on their arse watching TV and still getting paid that furlough money. My girlfriend wakes up at 5 to 10 a.m, not the 7:30 a.m. that you need to wake up at if you're actually going to go into the office, and she turns on her laptop in bed and goes back to sleep. And she's evolved a twitch in her hand to keep the laptop active while she snoozes. And of course British people love social distancing. It removes social anxiety and stressing over hugging. Oh, but Leo, what would you know? You're just a comedian. Yeah, but I'm also an ACPO accredited criminal intelligence analyst and intelligence consultant with previous clients including the I've won industry awards for my analysis and data visualization. This is important because data doesn't tell the whole story. It has to be interpreted and contextualized. So cancer diagnoses are way down, which you could interpret as coronavirus curing cancer. But it's obviously not. It's because millions of cancer screenings are being missed, so people are sitting at home unaware they've got cancer and not getting their treatment. On the other hand, it looks like coronavirus infection rates have shot up over the last few weeks, but like I said, it's just from millions more people being tested. Previously they just have coronavirus and develop antibodies without even realising. And lockdown is hurting everyone. Studies have shown that isolation and confinement lead to fatigue, sleep disorders, stress, neurocognitive impairment, depression, hostility, sleep disturbance, worry, regret, hallucinations and immune system deficits. It's a cocaine come down but without the fun part. A meta-analysis by Holt Lansted found social isolation increases risk of mortality by 29%. That's more than coronavirus. Probably. I don't fucking know, and neither do the scientists. Children are almost completely unaffected by the virus, but they're missing school and having to isolate. I think the WHO is trying to ruin more childhoods than the WHO. You know who's not been locking down at all? Shop workers. The people on the tills in Tesco were still there all the way through lockdown when everyone thought coronavirus was totally deadly. They were like the guys going under the reactor at Chernobyl, risking their lives for us. If avoiding lockdown was deadly, Tesco would have a higher body count than World War I. Tearful wives and mothers would be waving goodbye to men who bravely go off to stack shelves for a few weeks before collapsing in aisle 9, their last breath giving a gold locket to Trevor to give to their girl back home if she can get a delivery window for it. But what happened to all these shop workers? Nothing. They're all still in there, just pissed off that they didn't have cushy office jobs that let them watch Netflix on furlough money for 6 months. And with lockdown easing, we had some real social contact. Pubs opened, kind of. I mean, you have to drink in a beer garden, which would be fine if we were in a country where you can be outside for more than half an hour without dying from pneumonia. But this is Britain. Lockdown has impacted social health as well. Like, social distancing breaks down the bonds of empathy that make us be nice to each other. And the coronavirus rules have given us a new excuse to be horrible to each other. A year ago, if a masked man screamed abuse at a woman, it would be seen as a bad thing. Now he's a righteous saviour, stopping an evil granny killer from spreading coronavirus. The hysteria is making us antisocial. There's a behavioural immune system which limits the spread of disease by suppressing non-conforming behaviour and excluding unfamiliar people. And this behaviour made total sense when we were living in tribes, running around with our dicks tucked into a bit of string tied around our stomach, chasing elephants over cliffs and shooting monkeys with blow darts. But now that this behaviour is exhibited online where you can't actually catch diseases, it just comes across as a little bit cunty. And it's manifesting itself as witch hunts, public outrage, violent protests and clashes. You can feel the disharmony in society. It's fraying at the seams. It's not just Westerners that are suffering. The developing world is being thrown into poverty. And it's not even for a good reason, like us taking their natural resources or making them grow coffee for us instead of food for them. It's because we're not going on holiday. And you might think that not having British people in your land, like getting drunk, trying to talk foreign languages by adding an O onto the end of words and increasing the volume, fighting and fingering someone in the town fountain, it might be a welcome reprieve. But along with our terrible behaviour, we bring money. Tourism is 80% of Bali's economy. Without that money flowing in, people are literally starving. But the biggest worry is that we're losing our freedom. Since medieval times, when we were all serfs toiling unendingly in the mud to pick turnips, like an early version of a Chinese iPhone factory, we've had to fight for our basic human rights. These are now defined in British law under the Human Rights Act and have been burned to the ground under coronavirus. Freedom of assembly and association is gone. You're now not allowed to see your friends or assemble in groups unless you're protesting racial discrimination in Minnesotan police. If you do assemble in groups to protest stuff, the police will punch you in the face and taser you for your own good to make sure your smouldering, electrocuted body stays safe from coronavirus. We've also lost the right to privacy and family life. You can't go and see your family. Your auntie has to stay in dreary isolation lest you hug her and expose her to a tiny chance of catching a virus with a tiny mortality rate. And soon you'll be compelled by the government to download an app that tracks your every movement and who you talk to. Oh, but Leo, the app is just collecting data that Facebook and Google already collect. Yeah, but Facebook and Google don't have the powers to come and kick down my door and handcuff me and rendition me to an airfield in Afghanistan where people attach electrodes to my testicles. I mean, not yet. I'm pretty sure Mark Zuckerberg is working on it. I think it's time for the Nokia 3210 to come back. Try getting an app on that. There's no freedom of movement during lockdown, obviously. There's no freedom of worship because you're not allowed to go to a church, synagogue or a mosque. As well as sweeping away basic human rights, the government have passed draconian new laws. Under the Coronavirus Act of 2020, the police can remove you from your own home for quarantine or testing if they suspect you of being ill. Anybody else worried about this? You think I'm being alarmist? Look at China. An authoritarian surveillance society with literal gulags to punish political and social dissent. And for years the assumption was that as China's people get wealthier, the country would naturally gravitate towards freedom and democracy. This hasn't happened. They're happy to have an authoritarian surveillance state while living standards are still going up. Instead, it's the West that are losing our human rights. And the government is encouraging everyone to become a little grass as well and tell on their neighbours if they have 7 people in their garden instead of 6 people. And we're a nation of chinless milk monarch cunts, so we'll do it as well. Think of the damage that's going to do to social cohesion. In East Germany, under the Stasi, the German secret police, 1 in 7 people was employed by the Stasi to grass on their neighbours. Now everyone's doing it for free. People say that breaking lockdown during Black Lives Matter protests was justified. You can't justify going to the pub in the same way. Man, don't tell me what I prioritise. I prioritise going to the pub pretty fucking high. I want to get drunk, and I've never ever ever heard one of you say, "Oh no, sorry Leo, I can't come down the pub tonight. I've got to resolve racial injustice in Minnesotan police." Look, I'm not saying we shouldn't take some measures to stop coronavirus. I don't mind wearing a mask. It's like a cosy little blanket for my chin, and I like how you can only see my eyes while I wear it. I feel sexy and mysterious, like an Egyptian belly dancer just gyrating gently at the bus stop, asking people if they want a private dance. It's a handy source of income right now. And if you want to stay home and wear a hazmat suit and descend into poverty and avoid all human contact and avoid crowds and avoid laughter and fun and comedy and all the things that make us human and make life worth living, fine, you do it. I won't stop you. But don't stop me living my life. I'm not worried about coronavirus. I've been eating ass for 2 decades. My immune system has been in training for this. It's tougher than Keith Richards' liver.